Welcome. Good morning and welcome to the Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Chris Corey. I'm the secretary of the board. Whether you've been with us on Sundays for a long time or are visiting with us for the first time today, we welcome you to our service. This congregation is diverse in beliefs, with participation open to all who agree to embrace our covenant, mission, and values, regardless of your partisanship or lack thereof. We are a welcome congregation to people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, races, ethnicities, and abilities. We unconditionally welcome you as your full, authentic self to our community of care, spiritual growth, and personal growth. Our congregational mission is to strengthen our connections to one another and our planet by enlivening minds and spirits, building community through liberating love, and advocating fiercely for justice. It is a custom in this congregation to welcome visitors and newcomers. If it's your first time here, would you mind raising your hand so we can acknowledge you? Oh, yay! Oh, thank you for checking us out today. Everyone is invited to join us for coffee after the service. New and newish folks and just introverts are invited to grab a green mug located inside the door of the fellowship hall so we can easily spot you and speak to you during our coffee hour. You are also welcome to fill out one of the gold cards located in the pew in front of you so you can stay informed of all our activities. Just drop the card in the offering basket or in the box at the hello table in the foyer. Please know that whatever your religious history, whatever your spirituality, all people of goodwill are welcome here. Your presence makes us better. Your presence makes us whole. Our service will now begin.
Good morning. I am Ken Elder. I am pleased to be your worship associate today. Our theme for January is resistance. So this chalice lighting reading is by Reverend Liz Weber. The title is For All That Is Our Life. Spirit of life, help us to be present with all that is our life, both our deepest sorrows and our greatest joys, so that we can truly live, engaging fully in our own life and in our community. Spirit of community, help us know how linked we are, how each one of our cares touches the all. Help us to ask for support when we are in need and offer our support to others when we are able, so that we may rest in the solace of one another's love. Spirit of love, help us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, so that we might fully embody love and resist hatred. Spirit of resistance, help us to stick up for what is right, even when we are tired or afraid. Help us to dream of the world as it should be and act to bring that world about. Help us find hope each day. Spirit of hope, help us through this day and each day. Help us to be present for all that is our life.
Good morning, Goof. I'm the Reverend Chris Hockman. So happy to see you all here on this rather chilly but very sunny Sunday morning. Our call to worship this morning is from the Reverend Michelle Collins. Welcome to this place, a place where hope can be nourished. In a world that profits from despair, our gathering is a declaration of faith. We declare that joy still rises, kindness still matters, and that hope is not dead. We come to remember we are not alone. May our time together restore us to wonder, strengthen our resolve, and return us to the world as bearers of hope that sustains the work of resistance. Come, let us worship together. Please rise in body or spirit and let us sing.
Good morning. I'm David Funderburk. I'm the Director of Religious Education here at Goof, and I want to welcome any children or youth or anyone of any age who'd like to hear our story up close today to come sit in the front pews or on the floor at the base of the steps. Welcome. One bit of wisdom. My goodness. There's mics in new places, so we'll adjust. One little bit of wisdom that I read several years ago that has stuck with me is that I never have to play a game with someone that I don't want to play. So, an example of that, if someone picks a fight with me and they're trying to get me to react and get into a fight with them, I don't have to play that game. I don't have to be in a fight with them because I don't want to fight that way. I don't want to feel like I'm someone who's going to hurt somebody else. So I'm going to refuse to play that game. Our theme this month has been practicing resistance. And so our story today is about how sometimes resisting means refusing to play the game that everyone else is playing. And that's okay for you to do your own thing, if that's what's right for you. The story is called The Story of Ferdinand by Munro Leaf. Drawings by Robert Lawson. Once upon a time in Spain, there was a little bull, and his name was Ferdinand. All the other little bulls he lived with would run and jump and butt their heads together. But not Ferdinand. He liked to sit just quietly and smell the flowers. He had a favorite spot out in the pasture under a cork tree. It was his favorite tree, and he would sit in its shade all day and smell the flowers. Sometimes his mother, who was a cow, would worry about him. She was afraid he would be lonesome all by himself. "Why don't you run and play with the other little bulls and skip and butt your head?" she would say. But Ferdinand would shake his head. "I like it better here where I can sit just quietly and smell the flowers." His mother saw that he was not lonesome, and because she was an understanding mother, even though she was a cow, she let him just sit there and be happy. As the years went by, Ferdinand grew and grew until he was very big and strong. All the other bulls who had grown up with him in the same pasture would fight each other all day. They would butt each other and stick each other with their horns. What they wanted most of all was to be picked to fight at the bullfights in Madrid. But not Ferdinand. He still liked to sit just quietly under the cork tree and smell the flowers. One day, 5 men came in very funny hats to pick the biggest, fastest, roughest bull to fight in the big bullfights in Madrid. All the other bulls ran around, snorting and butting, leaping and jumping, so the men would think that they were very, very strong and fierce and pick them. Ferdinand knew that they wouldn't pick him, so he didn't care. So he went out to his favorite cork tree to sit down. He didn't look where he was sitting, and instead of sitting on the nice cool grass in the shade, he sat on a bumblebee. Well, if you were a bumblebee and a bull sat on you, what would you do? What would you do? You would be dead? This bumblebee wasn't dead. This bumblebee stung him. And that's just what this bee did to Ferdinand. Wow, did it hurt? Ferdinand jumped up with a snort. He ran around puffing and snorting, butting and pawing the ground as if he were crazy. The 5 men saw him, and they all shouted with joy. Here was the largest and fiercest bull of all, just the one for the bullfights in Madrid. So they took him away for the bullfight day in a cart. What a day it was. Flags were flying, bands were playing, and all the lovely ladies had flowers in their hair. They had a parade into the bull ring. First came the banderilleros with long, sharp pins, with ribbons on them to stick in the bull and make him mad. Next came the picadores, who rode skinny horses and they had long spears to stick in the bull and make him madder. Then came the matador, the proudest of all. He thought he was very handsome and bowed to the ladies. He had a red cape and a sword that was supposed to stick the bull last of all. Then came the bull. And you know who that was, don't you? Ferdinand. They called him Ferdinand the Fierce, and all the banderilleros were afraid of him, and the picadores were afraid of him, and the matador was scared stiff. Ferdinand ran to the middle of the ring, and everyone shouted and clapped because they thought he was going to fight fiercely and butt and snort and stick his horns around. But not Ferdinand. When he got to the middle of the ring, he saw the flowers in all the lovely ladies' hair, and he just sat down and quietly smelled. He wouldn't fight and be fierce no matter what they did. He just sat and smelled. And the banderilleros were mad, and the picadores were madder, and the matador was so mad he cried because he couldn't show off with his cape and sword. So they had to take Ferdinand home. And for all I know, he's sitting there still under his favorite cork tree, smelling the flowers just quietly. He is very happy. Thank you for listening. Now, whoever would like to come with me and go to your RE classes this morning, please follow me.
This being the second Sunday of the month, this is our Share the Plate Sunday. Today is a Share the Plate Sunday. Half of today's offering will be shared with our community partner, Pendleton Place. Pendleton Place's target population is youth aged 12 to 21 who are experiencing homelessness. Their goal is that every youth has a stable home. Their mission is to keep young people safe and support families in crisis through prevention, assessment, and intervention. If you are contributing to your pledge today, be sure to write pledge on your check or cash envelope. All other funds received will be split 50-50 with our Share the Plate recipient. Since this initiative emphasizes sharing, please do not write checks directly to the charity. The offering will now be gratefully received. It is our custom in this fellowship to share the joys and the sorrows that shape our lives, honoring each one with the lighting of a candle. We all have moments of celebration and struggle. By sharing these experiences with one another, we can support and uplift each other on our journeys. The first one is by Adriana Brooks. A friend and pillar in our spiritual community, Adrienne Carsey, passed away this week. She spent every moment spreading positivity and joy to all, leading many through grief and heartache through mindfulness and meditation. This was unexpected, and she leaves behind her beautiful 8-year-old son, Jay. Please keep him, her family, and friends in your thoughts and prayers. The next one we have is a joy from Scott Rowe, celebrating our 7th wedding anniversary with Dorothy. It is a beautiful, sun-filled day. The next one is a joy from our Building and Grounds team. Buildings and Grounds had another productive day yesterday. Even with the rain, lots of items were fixed and improved in our wonderful community home. Thanks to Laurie Morton, Amy Ingram, Ernie Glenn, David Frick, Victor Galea, Bloom, Stephen Chapp, Stephen Harold, Keith Hamilton, Fred Welberkin. Well,
Fred Weber King.
oh, Fred Welberkin. Okay. We appreciate all your efforts, and a fun time was had by all. And this is a joy from Malcolm. After struggling with a colonoscopy bag for a year following emergency surgery back in February, my surgeon has approved me for reconnect surgery March the 20th. And rid myself of the tyranny of bags. Glory be, he says. We will light a final candle representing all the joys and sorrows present in our hearts that remain unspoken. We will now observe a brief moment of silence before the meditation words begin. For our meditation today, I have a poem by David Block, a member of our community. David's poetry was published in December in the Soul Forte, a journal for spiritual writing. He had 3 poems published, and I have chosen one of them. This one by David Block is "We Hold the Key." Could we truly stand fully exposed before God, stripped of every pretense, fear and shame seeping like raw wounds? Would we run for the hills, stand frozen in terror, or weep with joy at being released from a lifetime of bondage? Do not deceive yourself. We are always naked before God. We protect ourselves from overexposure by clutching our clothes like armor, while our souls want to strip down and embrace God rapturously. Souls have no inhibitions. That is why we lock them in darkened cells. Unaware, we live like prison wardens, condemning joy and ecstasy to lifelong confinement. Yet, every moment, we hold the key. I'm reminded of a Tibetan proverb that says, "Defer not until the evening what the morning may accomplish." Seems like there's a sense of urgency in that.
Good morning. We have a relatively new hymn. It's in the virtual hymnal, so we don't have printed copies. It's a short one. It's a nice one, and I think it goes well with the theme of the month. The choir is going to sing it once, and then all of us are going to sing it 4 times. The words are by Julian of Norwich, which was an English anchoress of the Middle Ages. And her writings are one of the earliest surviving English language words attributed to a woman. Got it?
When we think of the practice of nonviolent resistance, we typically don't think of Ferdinand the Bull. I think more typically, our minds usually go to two of its most famous practitioners, being Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those are the two I really thought of the most. And for a long time, I never really knew much about the origins of nonviolence and nonviolent resistance. Where did this idea come from? And I was really unaware that one of its early proponents in the United States was from one of our religious traditions, from our Universalist tradition. And I'm speaking about a Universalist minister named Adin Ballou, Ballou. Now, the Ballou family in Universalism is kind of like the Bach family in music. There are many of them, and it's easy to get them all confused. The most famous Universalist Ballou is Hosea Ballou, who was a Universalist preacher who lived in the early to mid 1800s, and he was an advocate of preaching for universal salvation, the idea that no one goes to hell. Then there's another Hosea Ballou II, who is a Universalist preacher and the founding president of Tufts University. If you didn't know, Tufts University was founded as a Universalist college. He was the grandnephew of the original Hosea Ballou. Now, Adin Ballou, the guy I'm actually talking about, he was born in 1803 and was a distant cousin, about 7 years younger than Hosea II. And curiously enough, although he grew up outside of Boston, but only in Rhode Island, unlike the other Ballous, he was not introduced to his Universalist family roots until his young adulthood, and he was introduced to Universalism by his mother-in-law, who probably thought this was just a crying shame that her Ballou son-in-law knew nothing of the religion she practiced and his big name within it. But Ballou eventually caught on to the family tradition, much to the chagrin of his Ballou father, who was not a Universalist, but he became both a Unitarian and a Universalist minister, showing that Unitarians and Universalists had a relationship going way back. But he was also actively involved in the abolition movement, beginning in the late 1830s. And he continued to be involved in the abolitionist movement until abolition happened following the Civil War. Now, Adin Ballou was also a leading theorist for a group called the New England Non-Resistance Society, which brings about a really confusing wording because originally we talk about nonviolence as resistance. Back then they called it non-resistance. So even though they're saying non-resistance, they're meaning what we call today nonviolent resistance. All right. I know it's not helpful really at all. But he was a theorist for the New England Non-Resistance Society, think Nonviolence Society, which argued for the abolition of slavery through nonviolent means. Now, the passage of the Fugitive Slave Law was just a step way too far for many other abolitionists, and they called for violent resistance to slavery. Adin Ballou, however, remained steadfast in his conviction that slavery could be best ended through nonviolence. He saw slavery as a moral issue rather than a political one and chose to tackle it as a moral issue, focusing his energies there. Now, the other thing that's interesting about Adin Ballou is that his philosophy led him to found a utopian society called Hopedale, which is in what is now known as Hopedale, Massachusetts. This was in 1841. And the Hopedale community is now referred to as what you referred to as a socialist Christian commune. The community was to serve as a model of the moral life he envisioned. He wrote, "The Hopedale community was a systematic attempt to establish an order of human society based on the sublime ideas of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man as taught in the gospel of Jesus Christ." Of course, back then, Universalists were still very much under the liberal Christian umbrella. The community, interestingly enough, was organized as a joint stock company, and members worked together in various industries that were collectively owned. They agreed to practice nonviolence even as they worked for social change. The community harbored fugitive slaves and was frequently visited by abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass, who actually left an escaped enslaved person in the community's care. Now, Ballew's nonviolent views brought him into conflict eventually with other leaders in the anti-slavery movement. And as the Civil War approached, he refused to moderate his nonviolent approach. This position left him isolated from the other abolitionists, and he was pretty much sidelined by the movement. And unfortunately, maybe about 15 years or so, the Hopedale community dissolved shortly before the Civil War, mostly for financial concerns. And the industries that they had started were actually bought up by the members of the community who were the initial investors in the community and privatized and capitalized. So the communal town became a little capitalist town. But the church remained. There was a Universalist church remained there. So after all of this, Ballew felt himself to be a failure, both for his inability to build a lasting utopian community and for his lack of success at spreading his gospel of nonviolence. So Ballew's views on nonviolence did not gain widespread attention during his life or even after his life. However, late in his life, he corresponded with this somewhat obscure Russian author and philosopher who was writing a book called The Kingdom of God is Within You. This not obscure Russian author and philosopher was Leo Tolstoy, who was writing his masterwork on nonviolent theory. And Tolstoy consulted with Ballew about his thoughts and experience with pacifism. Now, you'd think the guy who is all but forgotten and gets the attention of Tolstoy would be a little bit nicer, but Ballew actually criticized Tolstoy's pacifism as too passive and thought Tolstoy's theology, this is quote, untrue, visionary, chaotic, and pitiably puerile. Now, Tolstoy was a lot nicer to Ballew and really thought Ballew did not get the attention he deserved. He wrote, "One would have thought Ballew's work would have been well known and the ideas expressed by him would have been either accepted or refuted, but such has not been the case. The word did not get out well enough for there to be much debate at all." So I think Tolstoy was the nicer guy in this little friendship. And it was through Tolstoy that the pacifist idea of Americans like Ballew were transmitted to the 20th century proponents of nonviolent resistance, namely Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. So Universalists were in the conversation way back in the day. And then the one we're more likely to think of when it comes to nonviolent resistance is our disaffected Unitarian transcendentalist ancestor, Henry David Thoreau, who was also a proponent of nonviolent resistance. You know, he's best known through his essay called Civil Disobedience. He was about 14 years younger than Aidan Ballew, unfortunately much shorter lived. Thoreau both agreed and disagreed with Ballew's brand of Christian nonviolence. Thoreau was concerned that Ballew's Christian nonviolence was not active enough. Martin Luther King Jr. recalled drawing inspiration from Thoreau's civil disobedience. In implementing the Montgomery bus boycotts, he said he channeled Thoreau's vision that one should not cooperate with an evil system. And then Gandhi, when asked about Thoreau, said in 1959, "Well, of course I read Thoreau. I read Walden first in Johannesburg, South Africa in 1906, and his ideas influenced me greatly. I adopted some of them and recommended the study of Thoreau to all my friends who were helping me in the cause of Indian independence. I actually took the name of my movement from Thoreau's civil disobedience." Gandhi continued, "You remember that Thoreau invented and practiced the idea of civil disobedience in Concord, Massachusetts, by refusing to pay the poll tax as a protest against the US government. He went to jail, too. There is no doubt Thoreau's ideas greatly influenced my movement in India." Yet the history of nonviolence goes back a lot further than Aidan Ballew or Henry David Thoreau. In a book written back in 2006, author Mark Kurlansky, he describes some of this in his book. His book is called Nonviolence, 25 Lessons from the History of a Dangerous Idea. He says our standard story of nonviolence may start in the US with people like Thoreau or some religious groups like Quakers who built a pacifist way of life based on the teachings of Jesus. But you can go way back to the time of Jesus or shortly afterwards and find, or even beforehand, and find he was not the first pacifist. There was a Chinese rebel philosopher named Mozi, M-O-Z-I, who lived in the 400 BC era, and Mozi was an opponent of Confucius. He disagreed with the prevalence of warfare and endorsed a concept of mutual love. He said, "To kill one man is to be guilty of a capital crime. To kill 100 men is to increase it 100-fold." This the rulers of the earth all recognize, and yet when it comes to the greatest crime, waging war on another state, they praise it. Most major world religions contain statements of nonviolent doctrine. One I've talked about already is the Hindu principle of ahimsa, or not doing harm. Buddhism has prohibitions against taking a life. Taoism speaks of war as destruction of the natural order, and there is Muhammad's complete ban on violence in his model society in Mecca. And of course, there is "thou shalt not kill" from the Ten Commandments, as well as the famous "turn the other cheek" from Jesus of Nazareth. Now, it's important to note that "turn the other cheek" that we hear about from the Bible is not just a wimpy statement about submission and passivity. Through a lens of nonviolent resistance, you can see "turn the other cheek" in a different way, as something like, "You hit me once, and you are not stopping me. Go ahead and hit me again, and try and see if it stops me. Okay, you hit me again, I'm not going to hit you back, but I am not going anywhere." That is another way of looking at "turn the other cheek." When looking at the history of nonviolence, it's important to note there is a difference in definition between pacifism and nonviolence. They're interrelated but not identical. Pacifism, as its name states, is passive. Now, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Pacifism is a great thing, but it is a state of mind or philosophy that rejects war and aggression. Nonviolence is an active practice and process. It's a means of political activism. It's a tactic meant to bring about change to an unjust system through nonviolent means. So back to 25 Lessons in Nonviolence, the author Kurlansky, he makes the case that war is not an effective means, or violence is not an effective means of solving conflict. He gives examples from history showing that warmongers, when confronted with nonviolence, usually denounce the nonviolent critics as immoral traitors and always claim to have God on their side. Not surprising. He also observes that once the guns of war start firing, debate about the necessity of a war ceases, at least for a time. I think that was true for a vast part of history. I don't think that is necessarily true, at least among this, me preaching to the choir today. But it is a thought-provoking statement that often at the beginning of war, you move on from the debate about should this be happening to other things. Now, we learned in school, hopefully whether you went to school in the North or in the South, that the Civil War began, or the war between the states, or the War of Northern Aggression, began when shots were fired at Fort Sumter. And of course, again, the rest was so inevitable, but was it? As if war just happens without any planning or decision-making or control. Kurlansky also observes that once a war is enshrined and justified in the history textbooks, it can be a long time before people question that war's necessity. It appears there are a lot of assumptions we make about war and its inevitability that may not be serving us well. You know, this author believes that the American Revolutionary War might not have been necessary. To support his case, he says, as John Adams wrote to Thomas Jefferson years after the Revolution, The revolution was in the minds of the people and in the union of the colonies, both of which were accomplished before the hostilities commenced. Now, Kurlansky believes that the colonists could have expelled the British through acts of nonviolent resistance akin to the Boston Tea Party. Yet, the words of John Adams are open to interpretation, and another author named Jonathan Schell used the same quote in his book, but he used the quote to say that although the revolution had been completed in people's minds before the military engagement began, the war was still necessary as a practical defense, to prevent recolonization by the British. So, whatever you believe about the American Revolution and the founding story of our nation, it's interesting just to reconsider the inevitability of past wars. Were there more peaceful options to meet the same and even better ends? Kurlansky also disputes the idea that civil war was an effective means of ending slavery. He says, "The Union Army, of course, did not set out to free the slaves. Such a cause would not have been well received in the North as justification for the conflict. President Lincoln pronounced that his objective was to not either to save or destroy slavery, saying, 'If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it.'" There's a part of history we would all love to forget, right there. It's very uncomfortable. When the Emancipation Proclamation finally came, it applied only to rebel territory and not the border states that permitted slavery, like Maryland. Again, whoa. So, could the abolitionist movement on its own, without a war, have won a more decisive end to slavery? We've been taught to think, heck no, of course not. We want that big war to have meant something. Even though the freedom granted to formerly enslaved people proved to be limited, and it took a nonviolent movement 100 years later to secure genuine protection and rights, basic civil rights, which again, these days are many of which are under threat and under question by some. So nonviolence may seem like an unrealistic or even naive alternative, but shedding blood in seemingly endless wars or aggressive military action, even outside of wars, things that cannot truly be won. This is something our country has done several times, but when you look at how rational is that, starting wars, shedding blood, starting wars, perpetuating wars that cannot be won, that's not rational either. If nonviolence is naive, fighting unwinnable wars is just kind of unhinged, I'd say. Nonviolence was successful in India, prevented a lot of bloodshed. It was successful in the civil rights movement. And again, the casualties were much lower than they would have been otherwise. I think it's very safe to say. Ultimately, the question for us is this: do we really need war or state-sanctioned violence to solve a problem, especially when we're being lied to about what the problem is and what the motivation is? And if war is not a more successful, or aggression is not a more successful solution than other alternatives, maybe we should be more willing to try other options. So in this travelogue through nonviolence, in Unitarian and Universalist history, and in our nation and beyond, there's some important takeaways, especially as the idea of aggression, state-sanctioned aggression, is definitely in play and on the table as I speak. And threats to nonviolent resistance have happened and resulted in the loss of life. So, I think it's important that we question the inevitability and the unavoidability of war and acts of warlike aggression. There is diplomacy, there is nonviolent resistance. And maybe these need to be higher up on the list of options. Next, I think we can be proud of our religious ancestors, who are some of the most foremost thinkers on nonviolence of their times. Nonviolence is a part of our religious DNA that I think we could be proud of and honor, but there's always a however. That's not to say that Unitarian and Universalist ancestors were all advocates of nonviolence. That is not true. The Unitarian minister and rabid abolitionist Theodore Parker kept a loaded pistol in his sermon writing desk, just in case the fugitive slave hunters came looking for the folks his congregation was harboring. So Parker was no pacifist. He believed civil war was unavoidable and necessary to end slavery. So both Unitarians and Universalists have strong histories of not agreeing on everything, even within their own ranks. Apparently, little has changed today. We come by it very honestly. In a time when our need to be out on the streets in resistance, in demonstration, in protest seems as great as ever, it's important to know about these legacies. History shows that nonviolent action can be a powerful and effective tool for transforming society and achieving lasting progress. As we acknowledge the diversity of thought within our own religious traditions, let us remain committed to questioning assumptions, elevating nonviolent alternatives, and honoring those who dared to imagine a different path forward. And may we continue their legacies of action. May it be so, and blessed be. Please rise in body or spirit and let us sing.
Please join me by saying the words on the screen as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words today are from the Reverend Tess Baumberger. May we go forth to meet oppression with freeing justice, hatred with healing love, and despair with unfailing faith. May it be so. Dear ones, go in peace, return in love, and blessed be.
you.